There we go. Haggai chapter 1, all right? That was great, wasn't it? And man, I feel like a nickel waiting for change just sitting up there and twiddling my thumbs, you know. But boy, they do a great job. Thank you so much. A lot of practice and time and energy goes into that. And I'm grateful for the talents the Lord has given them. The Lord's given you a talent, use it for His honor, for His glory. Amen. And we got some more folks. We'll go get y'all up here picking and grinning pretty soon too. So don't think you're escaping. All right, you're not. But you're up next. All right, Haggai chapter 1. I'm going to look at a thought this evening, and we will try to be kind of brief. But I'm looking at a thought this evening in the book of Haggai. There are, as we look at again, I don't watch the news a lot. It's too discouraging. But boy, the more you see the news, the more you see what's happening in our culture, in our world. There's no way you can be a student of the Bible and have any observation of current events and not say we're close. I mean, we're very close. And as we see that, I look at the people in the Old Testament and the Jews there. And remember, the Old Testament is written about the Jews, and there's a lot of things in the Old Testament. There are prophecies and there are promises that are not for us who are not the Jewish nations, but there are principles that we learn from them that are still applicable today. And we can view their responses. We can review some of the things they did, and we can learn from their mistakes. We can learn from what they did well. We can learn from what they did not do well. And so the Bible tells us that the Old Testament was written for our admonition. I don't want to get controversial, but it really doesn't matter what Andy Stanley says. The Old Testament is still the Word of God. And it's still applicable for us, and it's still beneficial to us. And so we need to look at it and to read it and to learn lessons from it. And the book of Haggai is one of those books where we can take some principles, and there's a very important theme there we find in Haggai chapter 1, and you've already seen it on the screen. The time is now. The time is now. We wonder, Jesus is coming back soon. It could be any day. And when is the church going to get, and I'm talking about the church as a whole now, when are believers going to get serious about serving God and giving the gospel and living holy? Well, can I say to you, the time has come and the time is now. But in our blinded state, we often want to put off to the next generation. Well, that's for the next generation to handle. That's for the young people coming up to do. But notice what the Bible said in Haggai chapter 1, verse 1. The Bible said, in the second year of Darius the king, in the 6th month, in the first day of the month, came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet unto Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua the son of Josedek, the high priest, saying, Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, The people say, the time is not come, the time that the Lord's house shall be built. Then came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, Is it time for you, O ye, to dwell in your sealed houses, and my house, and this house to lie waste? They said in verse 2, they said, Lord, it's not time yet. And he said, well, how long are you going to wait? Is it time for you to seek your pursuits and your dreams and your ambitions and the house of God to lie waste? And I asked us the same question tonight, or make the same statement. The time is now. And God was saying to the children of Israel, hey, don't procrastinate. Don't wait any longer. They're starting to be delivered out of captivity. There are a lot of prophets. There are 16 prophetical books in the Bible. 11 of those books are before the captivity. Jonah, Amos, Obadiah, Isaiah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Jeremiah, and Lamentations. All those were during the years of the divided kingdom, but before they went into captivity. And then there are 2 books that are written during the captivity, and that is Ezekiel and Daniel. And then there are 3 books that are written by the prophets after the captivity, and they are Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. So now the nation of Israel has seen a united kingdom under David turn into a divided kingdom. And then for many years, the prophets there tried to sway the people back to the Lord. And then they refused, and we'll read that in just a little bit. But they refused and rebelled against God. And so God said, okay, I'm going to keep my promise. I'm going to bring captivity. So they came into captivity. The northern kingdom came into captivity first, and then the southern kingdom. And now they were released from that captivity, and they're now allowed to go back to Israel. And after all of that, especially after Daniel, after how God used Daniel in such a miraculous way to bring people back to God and to take a stand in a wicked culture. And I love what Brother Kevin is doing on Sunday morning in Sunday school. He said, well, preacher, this day is too wicked to stand. I don't think it's any more wicked than what Daniel faced. And if Daniel could stand for what's right, I think we can. And they saw all of that. They saw what God did and how God raised Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego up, and how God used Daniel in a mighty way. And in spite of all of God's blessings for hundreds of years, and then judgment for a number of years, and then captivity, and then release from the captivity, when God said to the children of Israel, it's time to rebuild the temple, they said, really? Now? It's not time yet. Let somebody else do it. Let somebody else take the load. And the Lord said, look, the time is now. And I'll look at 4 things very quickly from this passage, from this book. Again, we're going to preach the whole book. Won't be that long, but just 2 chapters. But some very important things that we find here. Notice, first of all, number 1, we see the priorities that they pondered. the priorities that they pondered. And boy, that is a dilemma in which we face today. There are so many things that demand our attention. There are so many things that we often hear, boy, it was good when we lived in simpler days. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I enjoy some technology, not all of it, but I enjoy conveniences. I enjoy riding in a nice vehicle. I enjoy air conditioning. I enjoy computers when they work the way I want them to work. And I enjoy technology. We enjoy sound systems when they don't act up and go crazy like they tend to do right in the middle of a service. I like those things. But the truth of the matter is we have become more controlled by the things that we're supposed to control than anything else. And we see our priorities that we ponder. Notice if we're in verse 2. Notice, first of all, the blunder that they faced. The blunder that they faced. Notice, if you would, in verse 2, we've already read it, but in verse 2 and verse 3, they said, is it time? It's not time to build the Lord's house. The time has not yet come. And we see the blunder is that they put their priorities in front of God's priorities. And boy, we battle that today. We have more time-saving devices than we've ever had before, and we're in a bigger hurry than we've ever been before. And there's so many things that demand our time, and oftentimes, not all times, but oftentimes it is simply a case of misplaced priorities. And here they're released from captivity. They're able to go back and they say, look, it's not time yet. We've got other things we want to take care of. Notice what the Bible said in Isaiah 44 and verse 28. Remember, Cyrus is who is ruling now. And the Bible said in Isaiah 44 verse 28 that saith of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasure, even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple thy foundation shall be laid. God designed for Cyrus to reign in Persia simply for one reason, and one reason only. The Bible said that God said about Cyrus, he is my shepherd. He was a heathen king. And yet God said, he's my shepherd to bring you back to Jerusalem to build my temple again. And they still didn't get it. I mean, how are they missing the signs? After all that God did into captivity, to preserve them and to bring them to Babylon and raise up Daniel and to raise up Darius and Cyrus who would send them back. Where in history do you read anywhere of a conquering king sending the people back to rebuild their own temple and their own nation? That's unheard of. It was obviously a God-ordained event, and they still didn't see it. Why? Because they were too busy looking at what their priorities were. The Bible said in Isaiah chapter 45, verse 13, God said again about Cyrus, I have raised him up in righteousness, and I will direct all of his ways. He shall build my city. He shall let go my captives, not for price nor reward, saith the Lord of hosts. Here's what God said in Isaiah 45, verse 13. God said, I'm going to raise Cyrus up. I'm going to direct all his ways, and he's going to build my city, and not for price or not for reward. He said, I'm going to use Cyrus to be completely obedient to what I command him, and he's not getting any reward for it. But I'm going to direct all of his ways. We could stop right there and preach for a while. Is God allowed to direct all of our ways? We've been memorizing Proverbs 3. Verse 6 says, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. The problem is not God's ability to direct our path. The problem is we don't allow God to have the reins in order to direct our path. We still want to hold the reins. We still want to grab the steering wheel. We still want to resist when God says go this way, and we want to go this way. And that's the children of Israel. And God said, I'm going to raise up, because he could not trust the children of Israel to follow his path. He said, I will raise up a heathen Persian king, and I will direct all his paths. What an amazing statement. Notice some things about this blunder. First of all, they had lost a sense of obligation. Look in chapter 1, verse 2. Look in verse 2. The Bible says, then speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, this people say, the time has not come. Look in verse 4. Is it time for you, O ye, to dwell in your sealed houses, and this house lie waste? They had lost their sense of obligation. I'm afraid that oftentimes in the church, we've lost our sense of obligation. It is our responsibility as believers, not just as pastors or evangelists or missionaries or deacons, but it is incumbent upon every believer to give the gospel of Jesus Christ. And not only give the gospel, but also live the gospel. You see, we have a sense of obligation. Paul said it very plainly in Romans chapter 10. How shall they hear without a preacher? And how shall they preach except they be sent? May I say to you, missions is not, it's not a burden, it's a blessing. But we get to send missionaries. We have the opportunity and privilege of sending missionaries around the world on our behalf. Do you understand that every missionary that goes to a foreign field, they go on the behalf of Victory Baptist Church if we support them? What a privilege that is. What a thrill that is. And so, but they have lost a sense of obligation. I'm afraid in far too many churches today, everybody's waiting for someone else to do the job. Well, let someone else teach a class. Well, let someone else build a bus route. Let someone else take care of the young people because they don't listen. And let somebody else take care of the older people because they don't listen. And let somebody else do it all. Why not us? We said this morning that God has given you the power. And we'll talk about that again in just a moment. Number one, they had a sense of obligation. They lost their sense of obligation. Number two, they sought other opportunities. Look in verse 6 of Haggai chapter 1. Notice verse 6. Ye have sown much and bring in little. Ye eat but have not enough. Ye drink but ye are not filled with drink. Ye clothe you but there's none warm. And he that earneth wages to put it in a bag with holes. Boy, doesn't that sound like our economy today? Look at verse 9. You look for much, and lo, ye have come to little. And when you brought it home, it did blow upon us. Why saith the Lord of hosts? Because my house is that because of my house that is waste, and you run every man into his own house. We see the blunder of misplaced priorities that they did not have a sense of obligation. They sought other opportunities. They were only seeking and desiring to fulfill their dreams and their ambitions and their plans, and had left God completely out of the picture. Notice what he said in verse 9, or verse, I think it was verse, I lost the verse now, but he says, because of my house lieth waste. And he said, you do this because you're not paying attention, you're not giving God the priority. What is it that is taking God's priority in our life? Notice number one, they lost a sense of obligation. Number two, they had sought other opportunities. It is amazing to me. It's interesting to me how that we want to encourage young people to give their life to serve the Lord. Can I be honest with you? That ought to be our first option. Hey, well, God's not called me to be a preacher. Well, let me ask you a question. Has he called you to be a lawyer? I'm not against lawyers. Well, God's not called to be a missionary. Has he called you to be an electrician? Now, why is it that we have no problem volunteering? Well, I want to do this when maybe God is calling you to do something else. And you got to have some kind of special, mysterious call in order to be a pastor or a missionary or evangelist or work in some time of ministry. But you don't need that to do any other secular job. Hey, you're a child of God. You belong to him. It ought to be our desire. I want to serve God with my entire life. And by the way, that does not mean that God will not call you into secular work. Because he might. But I'll tell you this, if you have a desire to do his will first, he will use you just as much in that secular work as he can in ministry if you volunteered on your own. Boy, there's so many stories. One of my favorite stories is I think I may have told it. If I did, forgive me. But I can't remember his first name, but the guy's name is McBride. It's not Brian McBride, and it's not Dennis McBride. But the McBride from Sherwood, I can't remember his Jim McBride. Jim McBride worked for Coca-Cola, I don't know, I think 20, 30, close to 30 years. And every day he prayed. He worked at the Coca-Cola plant in Albany, and every single day he prayed, God, use this facility for your honor, for your glory. For 30 years, he started from the bottom, worked up his way to manager, managed the Coca-Cola plant there. And for 30 years, he prayed, God, use this place. It was a Coca-Cola plant. Now, I will admit he can use Coca-Cola better than Pepsi. That's my personal opinion, but I mean, you're talking about a secular job. But God used this facility for your honor, for your glory. Coca-Cola decided to close that bottling plant in Albany and build another one somewhere else. And they closed the plant, and finally they were going to try to sell it to the city. They couldn't sell it to the city and did some other things with it. And finally they called Mr. Jim McBride and said, we need you to come down here. We need to give you something. He'd already left there and had gone to work at Sherwood Baptist and was working there in the ministry there. And they called him over there and they said, we want to give you something. And he said, what is it you need to give me? He said, we need to give you some keys. And he said, keys? And they said, yeah, keys to the building, to the property. We're donating this facility to Sherwood Baptist Church so that you can use it for ministry, for God's honor, and for God's glory. And to this day, they have every month they house, they bring in young men, fatherless young men. They bring them in. They teach them how to change the oil in the car, and they teach them how to do electrical work and plumbing work. And men who are saved and born again and honor God with their life are teaching these young men and giving them the gospel week in and week out. And there have been multitudes who have come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ because of one man said, God, in secular work, use me to do your will. What's your priority? Is it just to make money? Nothing wrong with making money, but it ought to be that whatever place God puts you, whether it be ministry or whether it be in a secular field, it ought to be that your ambition and your dream and your drive and your goal ought to be, God, help me to use whatever skills you give me to honor Christ in all that I do. We see their priorities were that they pondered. They sought all other opportunities. And then we see also they were scared of the opposition. You know, oftentimes one reason we don't act the way we ought to spiritually is because we're afraid. The Bible says the fear of man bringeth a snare. Jesus says to his disciples, he said, don't fear those that can harm just the body, but fear him who can harm the body and the soul. And yet so often we back down from opportunities that God wants to give us simply because we're afraid. Now I'm going to address that in just a moment. So number one, we see the blunders, but number two, we see the burden. Look at verse 9 down to verse 11. Haggai chapter 1. Their priorities they pondered. We see the blunders. The blunders was that the house of God was lying waste. Look at verse 9. We see the burden. He said, you look for the much, and lo, it came to little. And when you brought it home, it did blow up on it. Why saith the Lord of hosts? Because mine house is that is waste, and that you run every man to his own house. Therefore the heaven over you is swayed from dew, and the earth is swayed from her fruit. And I call for a drought upon the land, and upon the mountains, and upon the corn, and upon the new wine, and upon the oil, and upon that which the ground bringeth forth, and upon men, and upon cattle, and upon all that labor upon other hands. Verse 9, because they ran to their own house. Again, their priorities were all messed up, and that caused a burden. Can I say to you, the more you put God first, the more he takes care of your needs. And the more you put yourself first, it seems like the burdens grow greater. Preacher, I don't understand. It seems like I work hard and I try to do it, and it seems like the more I do, the less I have. Well, maybe it's simply because you're more concerned with your house than you are God's house. Maybe our priorities are not what they ought to be. We see the priorities that they pondered. Notice number two, we see the presence that was provided. Notice, if you would, in verse 12 and verse 13, Haggai chapter 1, God challenges them. No, go back to verse 7. Let's read it real quick. He said, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. We're at the end of a year. We're getting ready to start a new year. Now's a good time to do a good evaluation of my priorities this year. I heard about a fellow one time, and I thought it was an amazing thought. Now, some of you, make sure you're sitting down. He said, I will never spend more on my personal pleasure in a year than what I will give to foreign missions. That's quite a commitment. I remind us again of the old saying that if there is no eternity, nothing matters. If there is an eternity, nothing else matters. And if nothing else matters, and again, I'm not saying you ought not take time off. I'm not saying you ought to have vacation and you ought not enjoy. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just simply saying that if you were to just take inventory and stack up what time and what treasure do I give to God compared to what time and what treasure I spend for myself, is it close? Is it way out of proportion? God said to the children of Israel in Haggai chapter 2 verse 7, he said, hey, it's time to consider your ways. It's time to check up. And the time is now. That's all. The time's not now. We'll wait. God said, oh, no. The time's now. So when we see the priorities, they ponder. Number two, we see the presence that was provided. Notice verse 12. The Bible said, then Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest, with all the remnants of the people, obeyed the voice of the Lord their God and the words of Haggai the prophet, as the Lord their God had sent him. And the people did fear before the Lord. Then spake Haggai, the Lord's messenger, in the Lord's message unto the people, saying, I am with you, saith the Lord. Oh, God's presence is provided. I love the song that I hear occasionally on Christian radio, You're Not Alone. Well, Dr. Bob Jones Sr. used to say, you and God make a majority. You're never alone. So, preacher, you just don't know how hard it is out there in the workplace where I am. There's no believers and it's just so hard. Oh no, trust me, you're never alone. You say, but preacher, in the school I go to, there's not many believers. Oh no, you're never alone. And I'm glad that when God calls us and draws us to himself, we are never alone. His presence is always there. He said in verse 13, I am with you. Well, we see three things that God's presence provides. It provides, number one, a proper fear. Look, if you would, in chapter 1 and verse 12, the Bible said toward the end of the verse, and the people did fear before the Lord. When we understand God's presence is with us, we're no longer afraid of men, but we fear God greater than we fear man. And by the way, let me be very clear about what fearing the Lord means. There's two kinds of fear of God. There's what I call an immature fear and a mature fear. When I was growing up, I feared my father. Why? Because he'd beat the daylights out of me. And some of you may have witnessed that, and some of you may have applauded that and said I didn't get it enough. But I feared my daddy. I want to tell you, my dad's not, some of you know my dad, he's not a big man. But buddy, he means business. And buddy, when he spoke, business picked up. And can I say we need some more daddies like that today? Yes. That when we speak, we mean business. We mean what we say, and we say what we mean. And it would help this generation. And if we had some more of that. But I had an immature fear. I was scared of there's things that I wanted to do that I would have done. But I knew my daddy would have killed me. But then there came a day when I wouldn't fear of what he would do to me. Here's an immature fear. Immature fear is fearing my dad's discipline. But there came a day when I loved my dad and I respected my dad and I didn't want to do anything that would hurt him. An immature fear of God is fearing the discipline of God. But a mature fear of God is fearing the disappointment of God. My grandmother, I don't know, several months after my grandfather went home to be with the Lord, I was driving through, they lived in the Atlanta area at that time in Griffin, and I was driving through Atlanta coming back from a trip, and so I stopped by to see my grandmother, and we stopped. She said, she called me Sonny Boy. She said, Sonny Boy, let's go to the cemetery. And I said, okay. So we drove out to the cemetery and walked to my grandfather's grave, and we're just standing there, and my grandmother, I could see the tears running down her cheeks. And she said, son, as far as I know, I've not done anything that would embarrass him or he'd be ashamed of. And I want to tell you, that was a convicting statement. Because the Lord said to me, could you say that? Not that the man laying in the grave would be ashamed of. That's what my grandmother meant. I understood what she meant. But you know what? You say, well, I fear God. Well, do you fear just as discipline? By the way, if that's all you fear, then that's good. It's better to have that fear than have no fear. But if all you fear is the discipline of God and the judgment of God, can I just say you have an immature fear of God? A greater fear of God is when you fear disappointing God. I don't want to let him down. I don't want to embarrass him. I don't want to cause him shame. But God's presence provided, number one, the fear of God. Number two, notice it also provided fervency. Look at verse 14. The Bible said, and the Lord stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and the spirit of Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest, and the spirit of the remnant of the people. And they came and did that work in the house of the Lord, of the Lord of hosts, their God. Not only was there a fear, but number two, there was a fervency. Notice the Bible said in verse 14 that they stirred, twice the Bible said they were stirred, and the Bible said they did work. Boy, they got busy. You know what? God's presence, if we're cognizant of God's presence, we'll have the right kind of fear. Not that I'm going to fear God's going to zap me with a lightning bolt. By the way, let me say this parenthetically. I don't want to, time's going, I know. But let me say this parenthetically, that sometimes we fear the judgment of God, and we want to put God's judgment for everybody the same. Can I say to you, there's not a parent in here probably that disciplines all their children the same, because they're all different. There are some kids in the same household that we have 3 daughters. There's one daughter, I could just look at her and she'd start crying. I've got another daughter, I could beat her from now to Sunday. And she would look at me like, you done? I mean, that's the way she was. And God doesn't discipline us all the same. And sometimes we look at someone and God, we know they're saved and they're disobedient to God, and God does not punish them in the way we think they ought to be punished. And so we think, you know what, they got away with it. And if they can get away with it, I go, hey, just listen, God's discipline is not always in our measure and in our time. God disciplines the way He wants to, when He wants to, in the manner He wants to. And it's not always outward. And I'm afraid a lot of our young people, sometimes they'll see older brothers and sisters, they'll see older people in the church who will walk away from God, and it seems as though that God has not judged them. Can I say to you, you don't live in that house. And you don't know what they're going through. And you don't know what God's doing with them. And so we see that God's presence, number one, provides a fear of God. Number two, He provides a fervency. The Bible said in verse 14 that God stirred them up and they got busy. Notice number three, we see that also God's presence also provides the fitness that they need. Notice, if you would, in chapter 2, verse 4. Yet now be strong, O Zerubbabel, saith the Lord. By the way, He didn't say in chapter 1, Zerubbabel, be strong. Why? Because the spirit wasn't stirred up. He didn't fear God. He didn't have any desire to serve God. But after God had given him the fear, and after he had a stirring, and he had a fervency to serve God, then God gave him the ability. Some of you are waiting for God to give you the ability when you've not had the fear yet. And you don't have the fervency. Well, boy, as soon as God just miraculously endues me with some great singing voice or some great talent, then I'll serve God. No. You got to fear God first. You got to have a desire. When you have the desire to serve God, then God will give you the ability that you need. But God is not going to waste His ability on people who have no desire to serve Him. We see the presence that was provided. Notice number 3 very quickly. We see the purging that was prescribed. Look in chapter 2 and verse 10. Again, God is trying to bring the nation of Israel back to Him. And He said, look, the time's now. They said, oh, we'll do that later. He said, no, time's now. And so we see the priorities that they pondered. We see the presence that was provided. God said, I am with you. Then we see the purging that was prescribed. Look in chapter 2, and we want to take time to read verse 10 down to verse 18. You can do that later. But notice just verse 17. Chapter 2, verse 17. He said, I smote you with blasting and with mildew and with hail and till in all the labors of your hands. Yet ye turned not to me, saith the Lord. All that God had done, and they refused to turn back to Him. Again, we don't have time to read all that passage. You read verse 10 down to verse 19. And over. 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 14. If my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and turn from their wicked ways. I want to tell you, if God is ever going to do something with us, sometimes there has to be a purging that is prescribed. You go to the doctor and they'll give you an antibiotic. Now, why do they give you an antibiotic? Because there's something inside your body that must come out. And there's not going to be any healing till that infection gets out. Sometimes God will not do any healing until the infection gets out. Anybody in here besides me not like medicine? I don't like medicine. But I want to tell you, there's been 2 times when I have not, most of the time I'll balk at medicine. I don't want to take it. I'll be all right. I'll live. 2 times. One was when I had ulcers a number of years ago, and I hurt so bad. I'd wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning just writhing in pain. And I was so sick. And finally I went to the doctor, and they said, no, look, you got to take every one of these pills. And I'm not a pill taker. I just don't like them. And I don't know why they make them the size of basketballs just about. And then a few weeks ago, 2 or 3 months ago, when I what did I have? I got amnesia. When I got shingles, I'm going to tell you, back in October when I got shingles, I'd have took 50 horse pills if they told me to. Because I'm going to tell you, I was hurting. And I was going to do whatever it would take to get that infection out of my body. Why? Because it was painful. And sometimes God allows pain in different areas of our life because we need to get the infection out. You see, the infection was there before the pain was there. And when the pain got bad enough, we left on a Thursday, and that Thursday night I didn't feel well. And Friday morning I told my wife, I said, I don't feel good. And she said, well, let's just go home. I said, no, I don't want to go home. And she said, well, we'll go another day. So we went Saturday, and I got worse Saturday. And she said, well, let's just go. I said, I don't want to go home. I'm on vacation. I want to stay here. I'm by the creek. I'm in the mountains. I don't want to leave. I don't want to go back to South Georgia. I want to stay right here. And she said, well, we'll go one more day. And so I stayed one more day. And I said, look, either I'm going home or I'm going to the doctor. I'm going to die. And at this point, I really don't care which one. But now that infection was already there. You know what drove me to go to the doctor? That pain. And God put the pain there because infection was going to do greater damage down the road. And sometimes God allows affliction and hurt and pain and discomfort in our life because He knows there's an infection. And if we don't get it out, it's going to bring further damage down the road. And so there's a prescription that's prescribed, and there's a purging that is prescribed. Again, 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and turn from their wicked ways. Job 36 verse 13, the Bible said the hypocrite heapeth wrath upon himself. The person who says, I'm not going to listen to God. In Isaiah chapter 42, verse 25, when Isaiah had preached his heart out, the Bible said, God said, I set them on fire, and they laid it not to their heart. Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 3, Jeremiah preached, and the Bible said that Jeremiah said, their faces are harder than a rock. In Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 16, he says the children of Israel said, we will not walk therein. Verse 17, they said, we will not hearken unto your words. In verse 16, they said, we're not going to obey. And then in verse 17, they said, we're not even going to listen. Boy, they needed a purging. Zechariah chapter 7, verse 11, the Bible said that when God spoke to them, they pulled the shoulder and they stopped the ears. Isn't it amazing how quickly kids learn? And isn't it amazing how absolutely descriptive Scripture is? You speak to a 2-year-old and tell them to come here, and you reach for them, what are they going to do? They're going to pull that shoulder back. And sometimes kids, they'll stop their ears. Now, that probably doesn't go well for them in the long run. And by the way, it didn't go well for us in the long run spiritually either. There was a purging that was prescribed. Notice the last thing very quickly. There was also a promise that was proclaimed. Notice, if you would, chapter 2. And notice let's go back to chapter 1 and verse 19. Chapter 1, verse 9. Chapter 2, verse 19, I'm sorry. Chapter 2, verse 19. The Bible said, is the seed yet in the barn, yet as yet the vine, and the fig tree, and the pomegranate, and the olive tree hath not brought forth fruit from this day, has not brought forth from this day, I will bless you. So God's making a promise to them. Notice, if you would, in verse 4 and verse 5 of the same chapter, he said, yet now be strong, O Zerubbabel, chapter 2, verse 4, saith the Lord, and be strong, O Joshua, son of Josedek, the high priest, and be strong, all ye people of the land, saith the Lord, and work, for I am with you, saith the Lord of hosts, according to the word that I covenanted with you when you came out of Egypt, so my spirit remaineth among you. Fear ye not. Notice three things he promised them. Number one, he promised he would guard them. Look in verse 6 of chapter 2. The Bible said, for thus saith the Lord of hosts, yet once it is a little while, and I will shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and this dry land. Skip down to verse 20 if you would. Verse 20, the Bible said, and again the word of the Lord came to the Haggai, and 24th day of the month, saying, speak to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, saying, I will shake the heavens and the earth. In other words, God's going to control the kingdoms. Verse 22, and I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms, and I will destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the heathen, and I will overthrow the chariots and those that ride in them, and the horses and their riders shall come down, everyone by the sword of his brother. He's talking about their enemies. God promised he would guard them. And by the way, again, verse 22 is so descriptive. That had happened before. Notice what he said in verse 22. He said, I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms. I will destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the heathen. I will overthrow the chariots and those that ride in them. Anybody getting a mental image in your mind? How about when the Egyptians were chasing the children of Israel across or trying to cross the Red Sea and swallow them up? One time the enemy was chasing. The Bible said the wheels came off the chariots. Man, that had to be a sight. I want to see that on TiVo when I get to heaven. Here's this heathen army chasing the Israelites, and all of a sudden the wheels we talk about the wheels falling off. Literally, the wheels came off. They're just sitting there right in the middle of the desert. Why? That's what God does. He guards his people. And when we turn to him, he promised, the promise proclaimed number one, he would guard them. Notice number two very quickly. Verse 19, we've already read it. He would grow them. In verse 19, he said, the seed is yet in the barn. He said, I will bless you. I will make you productive again. And then notice the third thing, he would glorify them as a nation. Verse 7, chapter 2, I will shake all nations, and the desire of all nations to come, and I will lift up this house with glory, saith the Lord of hosts. The silver is mine, the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts. The glory of the latter house shall be greater than of the former, saith the Lord of hosts. And in this place I will give peace, saith the Lord of hosts. Look at verse 23. And in that day, said the Lord of hosts, I will take thee, O Zerubbabel, my servant, my son of Shealtiel, saith the Lord, and will make thee a signet or a chosen vessel. I have chosen thee, saith the Lord of hosts. His promise proclaimed is that he would glorify them. He would guard them, he would grow them, and he would glorify them. May I say to you, when we turn back to God and we make God a top priority, God's presence will be known. And God's presence will make a difference. But may I say to you, it's time. Time is now. Matthew chapter 16, verse 3. And in the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and lowering. O ye hypocrites, ye can discern the face of the sky, but ye cannot discern the signs of the times. Luke 21, verse 28. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up, lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. And we are in that day. Luke chapter 21, we're in that day. Look at the signs of the times. And he said, look up, your redemption draweth nigh. Romans chapter 13 and verse 11. And that knowing the time, now it is high time to wake out of sleep. For now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 34. Awake to righteousness and sin not. For some have not the knowledge of God. I speak this to your shame. Can I say to you, the time is now for the church as a whole and for individual believers to stop putting God first in all of our priorities. Maybe, now I understand when you live godly, you do suffer persecution, you do go through things, but sometimes the truth of the matter is that if we'll take a good inventory, some of the hurt and some of the difficulty and some of the pain and some of the struggles we're going through is because we put God on the back burner. And we put our priorities at the forefront. And God said very plainly in Haggai chapter 1 and in verse 7, he said, look, you need to consider your ways. All this is because my house is ignored. May I ask you a very simple question tonight? In your life, how much is God ignored? Oh, preacher, it's Sunday night. Look, for Pete's sake, I'm here, preacher. I get that. But in your priorities, is this just an obligation? Well, if I don't show up, Brother Holland's going to call me. He's going to say, where are you? Preacher's going to come visit me. We don't want the preacher to come visit, No, your priorities. If you were to weigh tonight your treasures and your time for your ambitions as opposed to God's ambitions, how would it weigh out? And you know what they said after all they'd seen? The captivity, the rising up of Daniel and how God, after all the children of Israel seen, you know what they said after all they saw? Oh, it's not time yet. We got a little bit longer. We'll wait. And when I get older, I'll serve God. When I retire, then, no. The time is now. You know why? Because we're not guaranteed tomorrow. And I believe Jesus, it will shock. If we're here in 2027, I'll be shocked. I don't see how we can go another year. I really don't. But I do know this, the time's now. Time is short. Jesus Christ is coming. And by the way, if he doesn't come for another 100 years, you know what? Time's still now. The time is still now. You know why? Because your time's short. And my time's short. I heard a guy the other day, and he was giving a speech, and he was being humorous. I didn't think it was humorous. He said, I have 16 summers left. And he was talking about the average lifespan of mankind. Was 60, 76 or 78 for men? And he said, I've got 16 summers left. And I thought, I got to looking at that average, and I got to looking at my age. I don't have many summers left. And by the way, I'm not guaranteed I'll make it that long. And neither you. So the time is now. Heavenly Father, thank you for your word. Lord, you have given us so much. We look at the nation of Israel, and again, this was written to the nation of Israel. There are so many parallels. You bless them abundantly.